Taewon stood at the window of his small room and stared at the stars. They looked different from here. Everything looked different. He was on a space station the size of a small moon, surrounded by aliens who had lived for thousands of years. And he was supposed to help them with their research. He touched the cold glass and wondered if he had made a mistake coming here. A knock on the door broke his thoughts. Hana stepped inside with a friendly smile. She was human like him, which made him feel a little better. She had been working with the aliens for 3 years already. "Ready for your first day?" she asked. Taewon nodded and followed her into the hallway. The station was called the Eternal Forge. The walls were made of some kind of crystal that glowed softly. The ceiling was so high he could barely see it. Everything was clean and perfect and quiet. "The aliens here are mostly Korthians," Hana explained as they walked. "They live for about 4,000 years. So when they start a project, they think very differently than we do." 4,000 years? Taewon stopped walking. "That is longer than human history." "Exactly," Hana said. "So be patient with them. And they will try to be patient with you." They entered a huge room filled with strange equipment. In the center of the room stood 3 aliens. They were tall and thin with silver skin that seemed to shimmer. Their eyes were large and dark. One of them stepped forward. "Welcome, Taewon of Earth," the alien said in perfect English. His voice was deep and calm. "I am Velthar. I will be your teacher here." Taewon shook Velthar's hand. The alien's skin felt cool and smooth like touching metal. "This is my apprentice Zurion," Velthar said, pointing to a younger alien who nodded but did not smile. Velthar led them to a glass case in the corner of the room. Inside was a sword. It looked ancient but beautiful. The blade was made of crystal or metal. Taewon could not tell which. It seemed to glow with a soft blue light. "This is the blade of First Dawn," Velthar said with reverence in his voice. "It was made over 40,000 years ago by a civilization we know almost nothing about. They left behind only a few artifacts like this one." Taewon looked at the sword more closely. It was beautiful, but he could see problems with the edge. There were tiny chips and rough spots along the blade. "For 3,200 years I have been trying to restore this blade," Velthar continued. "The edge has imperfections that prevent the energy inside from flowing properly. If we can fix the edge, the blade will activate and show us knowledge from the ancient makers." 3,200 years. Taewon tried to imagine working on the same problem for that long. He could not. "What have you tried?" he asked. Velthar touched a control panel, and holographic images appeared in the air. Taewon saw thousands of attempts: quantum smoothing, molecular restructuring, dimensional phasing, names he barely understood for technologies that seemed like magic. "Each method failed," Velthar said quietly. "Some came close to destroying the artifact. We must be extremely careful. This blade is irreplaceable." Taewon studied the holographic images. He looked at the blade again. Then he asked a question that seemed obvious to him. "Have you tried just sharpening it?" The room went completely silent. Velthar stared at him. Zurion made a sound that might have been a laugh or a cough. "Sharpening," Zurion finally said. The young alien's voice was full of disbelief. "You mean like with primitive tools? Like grinding the edge with stone?" "Yes," Taewon said. "Exactly like that." Zurion shook his head. "That would be far too crude for such a delicate artifact. We are not barbarians. We use precision technology." But Velthar was looking at Taewon with a strange expression. "In 3,000 years," he said slowly, "we have never attempted traditional sharpening. We assumed such methods would be too dangerous, too imprecise. But you have tried everything else," Taewon pointed out, "and nothing worked." Velthar was quiet for a long time. His large eyes studied Taewon's face. Finally he spoke. "You have only been here for 1 hour, and you have already suggested something we never considered. Perhaps this is why we invited humans to join us. You think differently. Or perhaps he simply does not understand the complexity of the problem," Zurion muttered. Taewon felt his face get hot. Maybe Zurion was right. Maybe he was too simple to understand what they were doing here. These aliens had been working on this problem since before humans invented writing. Who was he to suggest they were doing it wrong? Hannah put a hand on his shoulder. Different is not the same as wrong, she said quietly. That is what they need to learn, and what we need to remember. Over the next few days, Taewon watched the team work. They moved slowly and carefully. Every decision took hours of discussion. Every test was planned down to the smallest detail. They were trying to develop a new type of quantum scanning that might, possibly in 40 years, give them enough information to attempt another repair. 40 years. Taewon would be an old man by then, maybe dead, and this was considered fast work by their standards. At night, he sat in his room and thought about the blade. He kept coming back to the same idea. It was a sword. Swords needed to be sharp. The ancients who made it must have had some way to sharpen it when it got dull. They would not have built something that required quantum technology to maintain. That technology did not exist 40,000 years ago. So maybe the solution was simpler than everyone thought. 1 week after he arrived, Taewon asked Velthar if he could access the complete historical records. He wanted to see every attempt ever made to fix the blade. Velthar gave him access without question. Taewon spent 2 full days reading through 3,000 years of research. And he discovered something important, something that shocked him. In all that time, with all those attempts, no one had ever actually touched the blade with simple tools. Every single attempt used advanced technology, lasers, quantum fields, molecular manipulators, things that worked at levels far smaller than the human eye could see. No one had tried a grinding stone. No one had tried sandpaper. No one had tried any of the simple methods that humans had used to sharpen blades for thousands of years. They had assumed those methods were too primitive, too crude, too dangerous. But what if they were wrong? Taewon went to find Velthar. He found him in the blade chamber, staring at the sword as he probably did every day. "I want to try something," Taewon said. "Let me sharpen the blade." With a stone. The old way. Velthar turned to look at him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "You are serious?" Velthar finally said. "Yes. You understand that if you damage the blade, knowledge that has survived for 40,000 years could be lost forever. I understand. But I also know that you have been trying to fix it for 3,000 years and nothing has worked. Maybe it is time to try something simple." Velthar closed his eyes. Taewon could not tell what the alien was thinking. When Velthar finally opened his eyes again, he looked very tired. "Very well," he said quietly. "I will convene the research collective. We will discuss your proposal. If they agree, you may make your attempt." Taewon felt his heart beat faster. He was either about to solve a 3,000-year-old problem, or he was about to destroy an irreplaceable piece of history. There was no middle ground. Taewon fell into a rhythm, stone across metal. Gentle pressure. The whisper of contact. Check the sensors. Move to the next section. Again and again, his whole world narrowed to just his hands and the blade. He forgot about the watching aliens. He forgot about the pressure. He forgot about everything except the feel of stone on metal and the soft sound it made. This was something he understood. This was something humans had done for thousands of years. Sharpening a tool, making something better with patient work and careful hands. The blade responded to each stroke. The energy readings grew stronger. The blue glow became brighter. Patterns began to appear in the crystal metal surface, swirling and dancing like smoke in water. Taewon heard gasps from the watching aliens, but he did not look up. He stayed focused. Just a little more. Just a little further. The blade was waking up after 40,000 years of silence. He could feel it. Something ancient stirring. Something patient finally given permission to speak. Time lost meaning. He might have been working for minutes or hours. His back began to ache. His hand cramped around the stone. But he kept going. This was too important to stop. Finally, he reached the last section of the blade's edge. He drew the stone across it one final time. The whisper became a song. The patterns became a storm of light, and the blade of first dawn activated completely. Light erupted from the crystal surface. Not bright enough to hurt, but brilliant enough to illuminate the entire chamber. The patterns that had been swirling now moved with purpose, forming shapes and symbols that flowed along the blade like water. The air vibrated with a deep hum. Taewon felt it in his bones, in his teeth. In his heart, he stepped back and looked at what he had done. The blade was alive. After 40,000 years, it was finally alive. Velthar made a sound like a sob. He stepped forward, his hands shaking. "Impossible," he whispered, "impossible." But it was not impossible. It was real. It was happening. The symbols flowing across the blade began to project into the air. Holographic images formed above the sword. They showed scenes from long ago. Cities of crystal and light, beings that looked almost human but not quite, technology that seemed both advanced and simple at the same time. And then words appeared, not in any language Taewon knew, but somehow he understood them anyway. The blade was translating, communicating. To those who find this, the message began. We are the makers, we who came before. We built our greatest works to last not through complexity but through simplicity. We knew that civilizations rise and fall, that technology advances and changes, but some things remain constant. Stone on metal, pressure and friction, the work of hands. The watching alien stood frozen, staring at the message. We designed our artifacts to resist the tools of the future. The message continued. We knew that advanced civilizations would try to fix our works with advanced methods. Quantum fields, molecular manipulation, technologies we could not imagine but could predict. And we knew those methods would fail. Why? Zurion shouted at the blade. Why would you do that? The blade responded as if it hurt him. Because we wanted to teach a lesson. The greatest danger facing any civilization is not lack of advancement. It is forgetting the fundamentals. Becoming so sophisticated that simple solutions become invisible. So focused on complexity that you miss the obvious. This blade is a test, a message in a bottle sent through time. Only those who remember how to work with their hands, who still value simple tools and direct methods, can unlock its secrets. We built it to wait for you, for the species brave enough or foolish enough to try the simple thing. Taewon felt tears on his face. He had not realized he was crying. The message continued. If you are seeing this, you have succeeded. You have proven that your civilization still remembers, still values the work of hands alongside the work of minds. This is the true mark of advancement, not abandoning the old for the new but carrying both forward together. Carry this lesson with you. When faced with a complex problem, do not forget to try the simple solution first. When technology fails, remember the tools your ancestors used. When perfection seems impossible, remember that good enough is often better than perfect. We, the makers, are gone. But our message remains. Stay curious, stay humble, and never forget how to pick up a rock and solve a problem. The holographic images faded. The light dimmed. But the blade continued to glow softly, its energy flowing perfectly through the edge Taewon had sharpened. The chamber was absolutely silent. Then Velthar began to laugh. It started as a small sound, but it grew. Deep belly laughs that shook his whole body. He laughed and laughed until tears ran down his silver face. 3,000 years, he gasped between laughs. 3,000 years I spent developing perfect theories, perfect plans, perfect methods. And the answer was to just sharpen it. Just pick up a stone and sharpen it. Other aliens began to laugh too. Some of them sounded like they were crying. Maybe they were doing both. Zurion stood staring at the blade. His face showed a mixture of emotions, shock, embarrassment, wonder. Finally, he looked at Taewon. You were right, he said quietly. And we were fools, not fools, Taewon said, just overthinking it. Happens to everyone for 3,000 years? Zurion asked. Taewon shrugged. Well, maybe a little foolish. That made Zurion laugh too. He walked over and put his hand on Taewon's shoulder. Teach me, he said. Teach me how to think like you. How to see simple solutions instead of always reaching for complex ones. I'm not sure I can teach that, Taewon admitted. But I can show you how humans approach problems. Maybe that will help. Hana was grinning so wide her face must have hurt. She came over and hugged Taewon hard. You did it, she whispered. You actually did it. We did it, Taewon corrected. Humans and aliens together. That is what the makers wanted, right? For different species to learn from each other. Velthar finally stopped laughing. He wiped his eyes and looked at Taewon with an expression of deep respect. 17 minutes, he said. That is how long it took you. 17 minutes to solve a problem I spent 3,200 years studying. 17 minutes with a rock you picked from our geology lab. Taewon looked at his hands. They were shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. 17 minutes, he repeated. It seemed impossible. It seemed ridiculous, but it was true. The elder alien who had presided over the meeting pushed through the crowd. She approached Taewon slowly, her ancient eyes studying him. "You have given us a gift, Taewon of Earth," she said formally. "Not just the restoration of this blade, but a lesson our entire civilization needed to learn. We have become so advanced that we forgot how to be simple, so careful that we forgot how to be brave, so focused on avoiding mistakes that we stopped trying at all." She bowed to him, a deep bow that made the other aliens gasp. Leaders of the coalition did not bow to anyone, but she did. "Thank you," she said, "for reminding us, for teaching us, for being brave enough to try when we were too afraid." Taewon felt overwhelmed. This was too much. He was just an engineer, just a human who had a simple idea, but maybe that was exactly what they needed. That night, Taewon could not sleep again, but this time it was not from anxiety. It was from excitement, from wonder, from the realization that he had been part of something important. He looked at the grinding stone sitting on his desk. Just a rock, nothing special. But it had unlocked 40,000 years of history. It had taught an entire civilization a lesson about remembering their roots. Sometimes the simplest tool was the right tool. Sometimes good enough was better than perfect. And sometimes, being new and inexperienced was exactly what was needed to see a problem clearly. Velthar had said humans were young, that they thought differently because they did not have thousands of years to plan everything. Maybe that was humanity's gift to the galaxy, not advanced technology or superior strength, but the willingness to try, the courage to fail, the ability to look at an ancient problem and ask the simplest possible question. "Have you tried just fixing it?" Taewon smiled and finally fell asleep. News of the blade's restoration spread through the galaxy like fire. Within days, every major species in the coalition had heard the story. Within weeks, it was being debated in academic halls and government chambers across 100 worlds. A human engineer had solved in 17 minutes what the galaxy's finest minds could not solve in 3,000 years. Using a rock, some called it brilliant. Others called it luck. Many called it embarrassing. Taewon tried to ignore the attention. He had work to do. Velthar had asked him to help review other ancient artifacts in the Eternal Forge's collection. Maybe there were other problems with simple solutions. There were. An ancient power core that had been silent for 10,000 years? Taewon activated it by tapping it firmly on the side. Turns out it just needed to be jostled to reconnect internal components that had settled over millennia. A historical archive carved in stone that could not be scanned by any modern technology. Taewon suggested rubbing charcoal over it like children do with coins and paper. The raised carving showed up perfectly against the dark background. A crystalline device that responded to input in ways no one understood? Taewon realized it was a musical instrument. The inputs were not data commands but notes. When played correctly, it produced hauntingly beautiful sounds. Each success was simultaneously thrilling and humiliating for the coalition researchers. They had spent centuries or millennia studying these objects, and a human had solved them in hours or days, using methods that seemed almost childish in their simplicity. But not everyone was happy about it. A delegation of conservative scholars arrived at the Eternal Forge 3 weeks after the blade's restoration. They were led by an ancient Korthian philosopher named Kastir. He had written extensively about the dangers of human influence on coalition culture. Velthar brought Taewon to meet them in a formal conference room. The atmosphere was cold. Kastir spoke without greeting. "Your methods are reckless," he said bluntly. "You risked destroying irreplaceable artifacts. That you succeeded does not justify the danger." "With respect," Taewon said carefully, "the blade had been broken for 40,000 years. It was not serving any purpose sitting in a case, it was preserved," Kastir snapped. "Preservation is not the same as service. We preserve artifacts so that future generations might understand them. You nearly destroyed that possibility." "But I did not destroy it," Taewon pointed out. "I fixed it, and in doing so, we learned things we never would have learned otherwise. The Maker's message, their philosophy, their warning about overcomplication, that knowledge was locked inside the blade. It only became available when someone was brave enough to try. Brave or foolish, another scholar muttered. Sometimes those are the same thing, Velthar said quietly. I should know. I was too cautious to try what Taiwan attempted. I was so afraid of failure that I achieved nothing. Is that really better than taking a calculated risk? You have spent 3,000 years studying one artifact, Kastir said. Your caution was justified, was it? Velthar asked. Or was I simply afraid? There is a difference between wisdom and cowardice. I spent 3,000 years calling my fear wisdom. Taiwan showed me the difference. The scholars left without changing their opinions. But they were only the first of many debates. Kastir published an essay called The Recklessness of Brevity. It argued that human lifespans were too short for humans to be trusted with ancient artifacts, that their impatience made them dangerous, that the coalition should restrict human access to sensitive research. The essay became wildly popular. It was translated into dozens of languages. Scholars across the galaxy quoted it. Some governments began discussing whether to implement Kastir's suggestions. Hana showed Taiwan the essay one morning over breakfast. He read it with growing frustration. He completely misses the point, Taiwan said. This is not about humans being better or aliens being worse. It is about different perspectives being valuable. We need both approaches. Careful study and bold experimentation. Patience and speed. Theory and practice, I know, Hana said. But try telling that to someone who has spent 500 years perfecting their theories. Change is hard. Especially for species that live so long they rarely have to change. Meanwhile, something else was happening. Something more positive. Young researchers from across the galaxy began arriving at the Eternal Forge. They wanted to learn from Taiwan. They wanted to understand how humans approached problems. Zurion became Taiwan's most dedicated student. The young alien followed him everywhere, asking questions, trying to understand the human way of thinking. Why do you always try the simple thing first? Zurion asked one day. Because we do not have time for complicated, Taiwan explained. Human engineers have a saying. If it looks stupid but it works, it is not stupid. We care about results more than elegance. If hitting something with a hammer fixes it, we hit it with a hammer. We can worry about why it worked after it is working. But what about understanding the underlying principles? We do that too, Taiwan said, but not always first. Sometimes you need to just try things and see what happens. Experimentation teaches you things that theory cannot. Zurion thought about this. It is frightening, he admitted, to just try something without knowing if it will work. To risk failure, yes, Taiwan agreed. It is frightening, but you know what is more frightening? Spending thousands of years planning and never actually doing anything. Never actually solving the problem. That seems more frightening to me. More researchers began experimenting with simple solutions. A team on the other side of the galaxy successfully decoded an ancient language by trying basic pattern recognition instead of complex linguistic algorithms. Another group reactivated a dormant starship by replacing corroded wiring with simple copper wire, instead of trying to fabricate the exotic materials originally used. Each success proved the same point. Sometimes the old ways were the right ways. Sometimes complexity was the enemy of progress. The Coalition Council called a special session to discuss the implications. Representatives from all major species gathered to debate humanity's role in galactic research. Hana was invited to speak. She stood before the council, small and human among beings who had lived for millennia. Humans are not better than other species, she said clearly, but we are different. Our short lives force us to think differently, to value action over perfection, to embrace failure as a learning tool. These are not weaknesses, they are simply different strengths. The ancient makers left a message in the blade. They said the mark of true advancement is carrying both old and new forward together, not abandoning traditional methods for advanced technology, but using both. That is what we are offering. Not a replacement for your methods, but a complement to them. Let us work together. Let your patience balance our impatience. Let your wisdom guide our boldness. Let our willingness to experiment inspire you to try new things. That is how civilizations truly advance. Not by having one perfect method, but by combining many different approaches. The council debated for days. In the end, they reached a decision. They created a new program. Human perspective advisors would be assigned to major research projects across the galaxy. These advisors would not replace existing researchers. They would work alongside them, offering alternative viewpoints and suggesting simple solutions when complex ones failed. Hana was promoted to director of the program. Taewon was offered the position of chief advisor, but he turned it down. He preferred to stay at the Eternal Forge, working directly with artifacts and teaching young researchers. Belthar announced that he was leaving the Eternal Forge. After 3,000 years, he was ready for something new. He wanted to travel the galaxy, visiting research sites, learning from different species. He wanted to see problems with fresh eyes the way Taiwan had. Before he left, he came to Taiwan's quarters. "I have something for you," Belthar said. He held out a display case. Inside was the grinding stone Taiwan had used to restore the blade, mounted on a stand. Below it, a holographic recording played in a loop, showing Taiwan's hands drawing the stone across the ancient metal. The inscription on the case read, "Sometimes the longest journey ends with the simplest step." Taiwan felt his throat tighten. "Thank you for everything, for believing in me." Belthar's large eyes were warm. "Thank you for teaching me something I should have learned 3,000 years ago. That being afraid of failure is worse than failure itself. That sometimes the best solution is the one right in front of you. That wisdom comes not just from long life, but from being willing to see things differently." They embraced, two beings from different worlds, different timescales, different ways of thinking, but friends. After Belthar left, Taewon stood by his window looking at the stars. So much had changed in just a few months. The galaxy was beginning to see humans differently. Not as young, reckless newcomers, but as partners who brought valuable perspectives, and all because of a rock and 17 minutes of patient work. Taewon smiled. Maybe that was the lesson. That big changes could come from small actions. That ancient problems sometimes needed simple solutions. That being different was not the same as being wrong. The future was bright. And for the first time since arriving at the Eternal Forge, Taewon felt like he truly belonged here. The meeting room was circular and enormous. Taewon sat at a small table in the center, while dozens of aliens filled the seats rising up around him. He felt like he was on trial. Maybe he was. Belthar stood beside him, calm and patient as always. Hana sat nearby, ready to help if he needed it. Zurion was in the audience somewhere, probably hoping Taewon would embarrass himself. An elderly alien at the top of the room spoke first. Her voice was like wind through trees. "We have reviewed your proposal, Taewon of Earth. You wish to sharpen the blade of First Dawn using traditional mechanical methods. Is this correct?" "Yes," Taewon said. His voice sounded small in the huge room. "And you understand that this blade has been studied by the finest minds in the galaxy for over 3,000 years? "I understand," the elder alien tilted her head. "Then explain to us why you believe your simple method will succeed where thousands of advanced attempts have failed." Taewon took a deep breath. He had practiced this speech 100 times in his room. "Because the blade is 40,000 years old," he began. "It was made by a civilization that did not have quantum technology or molecular manipulators. They must have had a way to maintain their tools using the technology they did have. Simple technology." Another alien spoke up. "A simple tool civilization would not have created something so sophisticated." Taewon shook his head. "Simple does not mean primitive. On Earth, some of our greatest structures were built with nothing but stone tools and human hands. The pyramids have lasted thousands of years. We still do not fully understand how they were made, but surely the ancient makers were more advanced than ancient humans," a third alien argued. "Maybe," Taewon agreed. "But that does not mean they were advanced in the same way we are now. Maybe they were better at working with their hands. Maybe they understood materials in ways we have forgotten." The room filled with murmurs. Taewon could not tell if they were agreeing or disagreeing. Belthar stepped forward. "If I may speak," he said, "the human makes a valid point. In our eagerness to use the most advanced methods, we may have overlooked the obvious. I have reviewed our historical records. We have never attempted traditional sharpening. Not once. That is because such methods are too crude," Zurion said, standing up. "The blade could be damaged permanently. One wrong movement and we lose everything. And how many times have we almost destroyed it with our advanced methods?" Belthar asked quietly. "How many times have we come within a fraction of a degree or a single quantum fluctuation of total failure?" Zurion sat down, but he did not look happy. The elder alien raised her hand for silence. "Taewon of Earth, you have presented your reasoning, but you have been among us for only 1 week. How can you be certain you understand the problem better than those who have spent millennia studying it?" Taewon felt the weight of all those eyes on him. He knew his next words were important. I cannot be certain, he said honestly. Maybe I am wrong. Maybe I will fail. But humans only live for about 80 years. We do not have thousands of years to plan everything perfectly. We have to try things. We have to risk failure. And sometimes being new to a problem is an advantage. I have no assumptions. No failed attempts haunting me. I can see the blade with fresh eyes. The room was quiet for a long moment. Then Hannah stood up. If I may add something, she said. I have worked with both humans and the Coalition for 3 years now. I have learned something important. Humans do not solve problems the way other species do. We are impatient. We are reckless sometimes. But we are also creative in ways that long-lived species are not. You live for thousands of years so you can afford to be careful. We cannot. We have learned to find solutions quickly, even if they are not perfect. Sometimes good enough is better than perfect. The elder alien looked at Hannah for a long time. Then she looked at Taiwan. Finally, she looked at Velthar. Velthar, you are the guardian of the Blade of First Dawn. The decision is ultimately yours. Do you believe this human should be allowed to attempt his method? Velthar was silent. Taiwan held his breath. I have spent 3,200 years trying to restore this blade, Velthar finally said. 3,200 years of careful planning, of perfect preparation, of avoiding any risk. And in all that time I have made no real progress. Perhaps it is time to stop being afraid of failure. Yes, I believe Taiwan should be allowed to try. The elder alien nodded slowly. Very well. But there will be conditions. The attempt must be monitored. Emergency containment fields must be in place. And if at any point the blade shows signs of critical stress, the attempt must stop immediately. Taiwan nodded. I understand. I accept those conditions, then you may proceed. May the wisdom of the ancients guide your hand. The meeting ended. As the aliens filed out of the room, some of them looked at Taiwan with curiosity. Others looked skeptical. A few looked worried. Hannah walked over and put her hand on his shoulder. You did well, she said quietly. Now comes the hard part. The hard part, right. All he had to do now was sharpen a 40,000-year-old irreplaceable artifact that the smartest beings in the galaxy had failed. To fix for 3,000 years, no pressure. That night, Taiwan could not sleep. He kept thinking about the blade. About all the ways this could go wrong. His hands might slip. The stone might be too rough. He might press too hard or too soft. The blade might shatter into 1,000,000 pieces. He got out of bed and went to the observation window. The stars looked beautiful from here. They reminded him that the universe was vast and old and full of mysteries. Humans were so young compared to other species, so new to the galaxy. What right did he have to think he knew better? But then he thought about human history, about all the times humans had done impossible things simply because they did not know they were impossible, about how being new and inexperienced could be a strength instead of a weakness. A knock on his door made him jump. It was Velthar. The alien looked tired, which was strange. Taiwan had never seen any of them look tired before. May I come in? Velthar asked, of course. They sat together by the window. For a while, neither of them spoke. I have been thinking, Velthar finally said, about fear, about how it shapes us. For 3,000 years, I have been afraid of failing, afraid of making a mistake that could not be undone. That fear kept me careful, but it also kept me from really trying. Taiwan looked at the alien. You are not afraid of my attempt? Oh, I am terrified, Velthar said with a sound that might have been a laugh. But I am also excited. For the first time in centuries, I feel hope. Real hope. Not the false hope of another careful plan that will take decades to implement, but the hope that comes from doing something, from taking action. What if I destroy it? Taiwan asked quietly. Then it will be destroyed, Velthar said simply, and that would be sad. But Taiwan, it has been broken for 40,000 years already. Sitting in that case, waiting. If it breaks while we are trying to fix it, at least we tried. At least we did something instead of just studying and planning and waiting. They sat in silence for a moment. Can I ask you something? Taiwan said. Why did you really support my proposal? You could have said no. You could have protected yourself. Velthar's large eyes reflected the starlight. Because I am tired, he said softly. Tired of being afraid. Tired of the same thoughts in circles for centuries. When you suggested sharpening the blade, something in me woke up. Something I thought I had lost. Curiosity, real curiosity. Not the careful, controlled curiosity of academia, but the wild curiosity that makes you want to grab something and try. Taiwan smiled. That is very human of you, perhaps, Velthar said. Or perhaps that is what all intelligent beings feel when they are young. And humans are young, very young. Maybe that is your gift to us. The reminder that being young and reckless and brave is not a weakness. They watched the stars together until morning came. The next day, Taewan went to the geology lab. He needed a grinding stone. Not too rough, not too smooth. He spent hours looking at different samples, feeling their texture, testing them on pieces of scrap metal. The lab technician watched him with fascination. "You are choosing by touch?" she asked. "Not by molecular analysis. By touch," Taewan confirmed. "This is how humans have chosen stones for thousands of years. Our hands can feel things that machines measure differently." Finally, he found what he was looking for. A smooth stone with just enough texture. It felt right in his hand. It felt like it would work. The word spread quickly through the station. The human was going to attempt his simple method today. By the time Taewan arrived at the blade chamber, dozens of aliens had gathered to watch. They stood in a circle around the center of the room, silent and waiting. The blade of First Dawn had been removed from its case and placed on a special table. Lights and sensors surrounded it. Velthar stood nearby with his hands behind his back. His face showed no emotion, but Taewan could sense the tension in him. Zurion was there too, working the control panel for the containment fields. If anything went wrong, those fields would activate instantly to protect the blade, or what was left of it. Hana gave Taewan a small nod. He could do this. He had to do this. Taewan approached the blade. Up close, it was even more beautiful than he remembered. The crystal metal surface seemed to pulse with inner light. He could see the tiny imperfections along the edge. They were so small, such a simple problem. 6 months passed. The Eternal Forge was different now. More humans worked there. More young researchers from various species. The quiet, careful atmosphere had been replaced with something livelier. People argued. They debated. They tried things and failed and tried again. It felt alive. The blade of First Dawn remained on display in the main chamber, but now it was not sealed behind glass. It sat on an open pedestal where anyone could approach it. Touch it, examine it. The makers had wanted their lesson to be accessible, not locked away. Taewan stood in front of the blade, as he often did. He still marveled at it, at how something so simple had changed so much. He heard footsteps behind him. Hana joined him at the pedestal. "Big day tomorrow," she said. "Right. The symposium." The coalition was hosting the first symposium on practical approaches to ancient technology. Researchers from across the galaxy were gathering to share discoveries made using simplified methods. Taewan had been asked to give the opening speech. He was terrified. "You will do fine," Hana said, reading his expression. "Just be yourself. Tell them what you told the council. Different perspectives are valuable. Simple solutions matter. That kind of thing. What if I say something stupid? What if I make humans look bad?" Hana laughed. "Taewan, you fixed a 3,000-year-old problem with a rock in 17 minutes. I think humans are doing just fine." The next day, the symposium began. The Great Hall was packed with beings from dozens of species. Taewan had never seen so many different kinds of aliens in one place. They filled every seat, every level of the enormous room. He walked to the center platform. His legs felt weak. His mouth was dry. He looked out at the sea of faces and almost forgot how to speak. Then he saw Zurion in the front row, giving him an encouraging nod. Hana was there too, smiling. And in the back, he spotted Velthar, who had returned just for this event. Taewan took a deep breath and began. 6 months ago, I came to the Eternal Forge as a new engineer. I was overwhelmed by the technology, intimidated by the knowledge, worried that I did not belong, and then I was shown a sword that had been broken for 40,000 years. He paused, letting the memory settle. When I asked if anyone had tried sharpening it, people thought I was joking. Or stupid, maybe both. But I asked because I am human, and humans think about problems differently than species who live for thousands of years. We do not have time to plan everything perfectly. We have to try things. We have to fail and learn and try again. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. What I did was not genius, Taewan continued. It was just different. A different way of seeing, a different approach. And that is the real lesson the ancient makers left for us. Not that simple is better than complex. Not that old is better than new. But that we need both. We need patient study and bold action. We need careful theory and messy practice. We need long-lived wisdom and short-lived urgency. He gestured to the audience. Every species here brings something unique to the galaxy. The Corthians bring patience and dedication. The Valerians bring artistic vision. The Thrixians bring logical precision. And humans, we bring impatience and experimentation and a willingness to look foolish trying new things. None of these traits are better or worse. They are just different. And when we combine them, when we learn from each other instead of competing, that is when we achieve things none of us could do alone. The blade taught me something important. It taught me that 40,000 years ago someone understood this. Someone knew that future civilizations would need reminding, that we would become so advanced we might forget the fundamentals. So they built a test, a message, a gift for those humble enough to try the simple thing. Taewon smiled. So my hope for this symposium is not that we all start using rocks to fix things. My hope is that we remember to value different perspectives, to try the obvious before dismissing it, to be brave enough to fail, and to never become so sophisticated that we forget how to pick up a tool and solve a problem. The hall erupted in applause. It started with Zurion and spread through the room like a wave. Beings of every species stood and clapped. Some made sounds that were their version of cheering. Others simply showed their approval in their own cultural ways. Taewon felt tears in his eyes again. He was not an emotional person usually, but this was overwhelming. The presentations that followed were incredible. A Valerian researcher had activated an ancient power core by striking it rhythmically, discovering it responded to percussion. A Thrixian team had decoded a historical archive by using traditional stone rubbing techniques. A mixed-species group had repaired a derelict station by replacing exotic components with simple mechanical alternatives. Every presentation proved the same thing. When researchers stopped overthinking and started trying, amazing things happened. During a break, Castier approached Taewon, the old philosopher who had written the essay criticizing human methods. "I owe you an apology," Castier said stiffly. "I was wrong. Or rather, I was partially right, but missed the larger point. Your methods are risky, but sometimes risk is necessary. I have lived for 4,000 years, and I have become afraid of change. That fear made me wise in some ways, but blind in others." Taewon shook his hand. "No apology needed. You were protecting what you value. That is not wrong. We just need to find balance between protection and progress." Castier studied him for a moment. "You are young. All humans are young. But perhaps that is exactly what the galaxy needs, a reminder that youth is not the same as foolishness, that inexperience can be a fresh perspective, that sometimes the newest voice in the room sees most clearly." That evening, after the symposium's first day ended, Taewon, Hana, Velthar, and Zurion gathered in a quiet observation room. They sat together looking out at the stars, sharing food and stories. Velthar had been traveling as he promised. He told them about the research sites he had visited, the problems he had helped solve, the young researchers he had taught. "I feel alive again," he admitted. "For the first time in 1,000 years, I feel like I am learning instead of just repeating what I already know." Zurion talked about his work developing what he called integrative archaeology, a method that combined traditional coalition thoroughness with human pragmatism. He had already published 3 papers and had requests to teach workshops across the galaxy. Hana shared updates about the Human Perspective Advisor program. It was growing faster than expected. More species were requesting human advisors. More humans were volunteering to serve. The cultural exchange was flowing both ways, with aliens teaching humans patience and long-term thinking, while humans taught aliens to experiment and take risks. "And what about you?" Velthar asked Taewon. "What are your plans?" Taewon shrugged. "Same as before, I guess. Work with artifacts. Teach students. Try simple solutions to complicated problems. Nothing fancy, nothing fancy," Zurion repeated with a laugh. "The human who changed galactic archaeology forever says he is doing nothing fancy." "I did not change anything," Taewon protested. "I just sharpened a sword. You changed everything," Velthar said gently. "You reminded us of something we had forgotten. That advancement is not about abandoning the old for the new. It is about carrying both forward together. That is the definition of wisdom." They sat in comfortable silence, four friends from different worlds, different timescales, different ways of thinking, but united by a shared experience, a shared lesson. Eventually, Hannah stood. "I should go," she said. "Early meeting tomorrow. But before I leave, I want to say something." She looked at each of them in turn. When humans joined the coalition, we were scared. We were the youngest species, the least experienced, the most different. We worried we would never fit in, that we would always be the outsiders. But what happened with the blade showed me something important. We do not need to fit in. We need to be ourselves. Because being different is not a weakness. It is our strength. Our gift to the galaxy. The reminder that there are always new ways to see old problems. She smiled. So thank you, all of you, for accepting us, for learning from us, and for teaching us in return. This is what the makers wanted. This is what civilization should be. Not one perfect species, but many different species learning and growing together. After the others left, Taewon stayed by the window. He thought about the past 6 months, about how much had changed, how much he had changed. He thought about the blade, about the ancient makers who had built it knowing that future beings would need their lesson, about how a message could travel 40,000 years and still be relevant. And he thought about the grinding stone sitting on his desk in its display case. Just a rock, nothing special, but it had changed the galaxy. Sometimes the simplest tool was the right tool, sometimes the shortest path was the best path, and sometimes the newest voice in the room was the one everyone needed to hear. Taewon smiled at the stars. Somewhere out there on 100 different worlds, researchers were trying simple solutions to complex problems. Young beings were learning to balance patience with action. Ancient beings were remembering how to be curious, all because someone had asked a simple question 6 months ago. Have you tried just fixing it? The galaxy was better for it. More open, more experimental, more willing to try new things and learn from failure. And in the center of the eternal forge, the blade of First Dawn glowed softly,